In the darkness of Tsavo, there was a whisper. Were they devils in human form? Or was it the rage of the land, given flesh and bone? The only thing they knew was that the hunters were as silent as shadows and as certain as death. They were not like traditional lions, maneless, larger, as if they had come from another time, another world. In 1898, in this remote corner of Kenya, thousands of people, brought in to build a railroad, stepped into the hunting grounds of these two mysterious predators. Soon, they would be named the Ghost and the Darkness. This is the story, written in terror, of humanity's helplessness in the face of the wild. The end of the 19th century. The insatiable appetite of the Industrial Revolution pushed European empires into the farthest corners of the world. The African continent, with its untouched resources and strategic location, was at the center of this global game. The British Empire, to consolidate its dominance in East Africa and reach the rich interior, especially Uganda, embarked on a bold project. Hundreds of miles of iron track stretching from the port of Mombasa to Lake Victoria. This line would later be cynically nicknamed the Lunatic Express for its engineering audacity, as well as its cost and hardships. This railroad would not only facilitate trade, but also solidify Britain's military and administrative control in the region. It was a steel signature, an empire carved into the heart of the continent. But the path of this progress was fraught with obstacles. The Tsavo region in southeastern Kenya, in particular, presented one of the project's toughest tests. This was a place where the boundaries of civilization blurred, where nature's own ancient, ruthless laws reigned. Tsavo, whose name was said to mean place of slaughter in the local language, was a geography that lived up to its name. The red volcanic soil, stretching out under the scorching sun, was covered in dense, thorny bush. The locals called this vegetation the Nyika, a labyrinth of whitish, drought-resistant, scraggly trees and, wait a bit, thorns that snagged on everything, dangerous for both prey and hunter. This Nyika offered perfect camouflage for lions, while becoming a form of torture for those trying to track them. And the Tsavo River, flowing through the heart of this harsh land, was both a vital water source for the railroad and a great obstacle to overcome. That is why the Tsavo Bridge was critical to the project's success. Without this bridge, the empire's advance would halt. But the true masters of Tsavo were neither the engineers nor the empires. The true rulers of this land were the predators lurking in the shadows. And the lions of Tsavo were different. Lacking majestic manes, or having only sparse ones, they were generally larger and more muscular, as if they carried the very spirit of this arid land. Perhaps these traits were a sign of primitive strength, a legacy from their ancestors, the Pleistocene cave lions, adapted to this brutal environment. Moreover, Tsavo bore the scars of unseen disasters. The rinderpest pandemic that ravaged Africa in the 1890s had decimated the lion's main prey base, buffalo, zebra, and other herbivores. Millions of animals perished, and the ecological balance was shattered. This scarcity of prey may have pushed the predators, fighting for survival, to seek alternative food sources. The fact that Tsavo had been a route for slave caravans for centuries might have led lions, accustomed to feeding on the corpses of those who died or were abandoned on the way, to lose their fear of man. And now, the railroad construction had brought thousands of unprepared and vulnerable humans, coolies, as they were called in the documents of the time, laborers brought from India and native Africans, right into the middle of the hunting grounds of these hungry predators. Scarcity, habit, and an unprecedented opportunity, a deadly storm was about to break over Tsavo. In March 1898, a young and determined engineer, Lieutenant-Colonel John Henry Patterson, set foot in this perilous land. His mission was to build the bridge that would allow the railroad to cross the Tsavo River. The camp, set up with thousands of workers, initially saw a feverish pace of work. But soon, this routine began to break down in an unsettling way. Workers were disappearing at night. Patterson writes in his memoirs that he initially and coolly believed these were murders stemming from theft or feuds among the workers. These losses were not yet frequent enough to break the camp's morale. They were seen merely as unfortunate incidents. But 3 weeks later, Tsavo's dark secret revealed itself in blood. At dawn, a wave of screams woke the camp. The strong and respected Sikh foreman, Ungan Singh, was gone. His terrified tent mates recounted the moment with tremors. It was midnight when the tent entrance was suddenly filled by a dark head. A lion, its eyes glowing in the dark. It had seized the nearest man, Ungan Singh, by the throat. The man's last strangled cry was, "Choro!" Let go, as he tried to grab the lion's neck. Then, in the darkness just outside the tent, the sound of a relentless struggle, the tearing of flesh by claws, the crunching of bone, and then that awful silence that swallowed everything. Those inside were frozen, helplessly listening to the fight outside. When Patterson ran to the scene, what he saw shattered his skepticism. On the ground were the distinct paw prints of lions, and heel marks in the sand showing the victim's desperate resistance. When he followed the tracks, he understood the extent of the horror. It was the most gruesome sight I had ever seen, Patterson would write in his memoirs. The whole place was covered with blood and scraps of flesh and bones. Only the head was intact. The terrified, wide-open eyes of the severed head seemed to follow me everywhere. The tracks of 2 lions were there. The lions of Tsavo were hunting men. It wasn't just grief that descended on the camp, but a cold, tangible fear. Patterson vowed in that moment he would stop these monsters, but the cost of that vow would be heavy. For 9 months after that day, Tsavo transformed into a kingdom ruled by darkness. Every sunset heralded the beginning of a new nightmare, the ghost and the darkness. The names the workers gave these 2 maneless male lions reflected their style of attack. Sometimes, in the dead of night, they would announce their presence with roars that shook the earth, putting the camp on nervous alert. Then the roars would cease, replaced by a deadly silence. That silence was more terrifying than the roaring. Everyone knew that in that moment, the lions were prowling, silently choosing their prey. Among the tents, in the shadows untouched by the flickering light of the fires, the desperate whisper circulated. "Khabardar Bayon, Shaitanata. Watch out, brothers. The devil is coming." The workers frantically built up defenses. They raised the thorny bomas, lit massive fires at night, and tried to scare the lions by banging empty tin cans. But the ghost and the darkness seemed to mock these efforts. They attacked with unbelievable audacity and cunning. They leaped over the bomas, crawled under them, climbed into tents. They often snatched their victims as they slept, just a few feet away from their friends. sometimes without giving them a chance to make a sound. They had even prowled around Patterson's own, initially unprotected tent. Tracks found in the morning showed how close the danger had come. After that, Patterson and Dr. Brock moved into a more fortified boma. The brutality and unpredictability of the attacks defied logic. Even the hospital tent was not safe. One night, one of the lions got in through a weak spot. The medical orderly came face to face with the lion and was saved only by the clatter of a medicine box he accidentally knocked over. But the lion didn't give up. It burst into another tent, wounded 2 of the 8 patients inside with its claws, and dragged one of them away through the thorny fence. The next day, the hospital was moved near the main camp, thought to be safer. But the terror followed them. That night, one of the lions breached the new, stronger fence and seized the water carrier, Beastie, by his foot, dragging him from under the tent. The man's desperate attempts to cling to a heavy box and then, when that broke, to a tent rope, could not stop the lion from dragging him out. After suffocating its prey, the lion prowled for a while with the body in its mouth, searching for a weak spot in the fence, and then vanished into the darkness. The remains found in the morning were horrific. A skull, a few bones, and a finger still wearing a silver ring. The terror didn't just strike the common laborers. In Patterson's absence, the Italian inspector in charge of the rail-laying team, Parenti, also became a victim. One night, a lion entered Parenti's tent, dragged him from his bed, and devoured him in the nearby bushes. Parenti's screams for help echoed through the camp, but the fear created by the darkness and the lions was so great that no one dared to leave their tent. The lions' audacity grew. Sometimes they would devour their victims just outside the camp, only 30 yards away, within earshot of the others, accompanied by the sound of breaking bones. Patterson recalled those moments. I could clearly hear them crunching the bones, and the sound of their dreadful purring filled the air and rang in my ears for days. Those sounds burrowed into the souls of the camp's inhabitants. On one occasion, while the lions were eating a nearby victim, workers from a neighboring tent wanted to take refuge in Patterson's boma, but in their panic, they had left a sick friend behind. When Patterson went to save him, he found the man had died of fright. Fear was as deadly as claws. For Patterson, the nights were sleepless, and the days were spent in hopeless pursuit. He waited for hours in treetops, on rickety platforms swaying in the wind, even in the claustrophobic darkness of a freight car. Every failure, every report of a new victim increased the pressure on Patterson. This was no longer just a duty, it had become an obsession. That night he spent in the freight car with Dr. Brock. They barely escaped with their lives by firing at the last second as a lion was about to leap in, but the lion vanished again. These escapes only fueled Patterson's desperation. The sturdy trap he had built with great hopes ended in a bitter fiasco because the soldiers inside were too terrified to shoot. The lion escaped through a gap created when the soldiers, firing blindly, hit the door. Patterson's anger and frustration were immense. It was as if the lions were reading his every thought, mocking his every plan. The daytime tracking was torture. Under the sun, inside the thorny Naika, the thorns tore his clothes and scratched his skin. Visibility was zero. Moving silently was impossible. The tracks always disappeared at those cursed riverside cliffs. The workers' belief solidified. These were not lions, but avenging spirits, devils. Even Patterson, at times, couldn't help but entertain the thought. Finally, the workers' endurance broke. After one last brutal attack on the main camp, hundreds of them revolted. Neither money nor orders could keep them there any longer. They lay down on the tracks, stopping the first train, and fled Tsavo. This land, they believed, was cursed. The bridge construction came to a complete halt. The few remaining workers tried to survive by taking refuge in treetops, on top of water tanks, or even in pits dug into the ground. That tragicomic moment when a tree, overburdened by the weight of those who had climbed it, toppled over, throwing the terrified workers right near the lions they were fleeing, showed the extent of their desperation. The situation was so dire that it was even discussed in the House of Lords in London. 2 lions had halted the advance of an empire. For Patterson, this was a personal defeat. At this moment of utter despair, District Officer Whitehead arrived in Tsavo with an offer of help. But even his arrival set the stage for a new tragedy. As they were walking from the station to the camp in the dark, one of the lions leaped at them from the top of a narrow ravine the path cut through. Whitehead managed to momentarily stun the lion with his rifle, but the lion quickly recovered and snatched his assistant, Abdullah. Poor Abdullah's last words were, "Oh, master, the lion." The lion disappeared into the darkness with its victim. That night, Patterson had heard the crunching of bones near the camp. He would only realize it was poor Abdullah the next morning when he found Whitehead, his back covered in claw marks, completely shattered. This was no longer just a duty. It was vengeance. This was now a personal war for Lieutenant-Colonel Patterson, a matter of honor. On the night of December 9th, 1898, he began the vigil that would change his destiny. He used a donkey carcass as bait and perched on a makeshift scaffold nearby. This time, he was alone. As the night wore on, the tension grew. The eerie sounds of the forest, it was as if the spirit of Tsavo was holding its breath. And then, that familiar, ominous presence. The lion did not come for the bait. It came to hunt the hunter. For hours, like a ghost, it circled Patterson, patiently, stealthily approaching. For Patterson, any moment could be his last. The fragility of the scaffold, the darkness below, the lion's silent steps. At stroke of midnight, he was nearly knocked from his perch by an owl that suddenly struck him in the head. His heart felt like it would burst. His involuntary movement was answered by an ominous growl from the darkness below. Soon, the lion moved again, beginning to crawl toward the scaffold. Patterson held his breath, barely made out the indistinct shape in the bushes, took aim, and fired. The gunshot was answered by a roar that shook the heavens. The lion was leaping wildly in the bushes, groaning. Patterson couldn't see it, but he emptied his magazine in the direction of the sounds. Finally, the powerful groans subsided, turned into gasps, and then absolute silence. The first tidings of victory came with shouts of joy from the camp, but Patterson was cautious. He was used to the tricks of these devils. When morning came, the blood trail did not lead him far. The first of them, the ghost or the darkness, lay lifeless. Its massive body, measuring 9 feet 8 inches, 2.95 meters from nose to tail, and requiring 8 men to carry it to camp, was the symbol of the first victory in Tsavo. But Patterson knew the war was not over. The surviving lion became even more audacious, as if to avenge its partner. A few nights later, it tried to climb into the railroad inspector's bungalow, snatching his goats. Patterson tried to ambush it again and again. He managed to wound it by firing from a scaffold, but the lion escaped once more. Those moments frayed Patterson's nerves even further. 10 days later, the nightmare was about to end. The lion appeared before Patterson one last time. This time, Patterson was in one of the trees where the workers had fearfully perched. That night, the moon aided the hunter. Everything was lit almost as bright as day. He saw the lion stealthily circling the tree. He calmly took aim, fired, and wounded the lion once more. The next morning, the blood trail led them to the final confrontation. When they met the wounded lion, the beast charged them with a final burst of fury. Patterson fired. The lion fell, but it rose again and continued its attack. In a last-ditch effort, Patterson and his assistant, Mahina, managed to scramble up a tree. Despite its broken legs, the lion tried to climb the tree with its claws. Death was only inches away. But Patterson, taking the rifle from Mahina, fired his last shots. The 9-month nightmare of Tsavo ended with the gurgling breath of the beast as it died at the base of the tree. Today, for those who visit the Field Museum in Chicago, the lions might seem smaller than the legends suggest. There's a simple reason for this. Before selling them to the museum in 1924, Patterson kept these skins as trophies for 25 years, using them as floor rugs in his home. Decades of foot traffic and cold winters shrank the hides and stripped away their terrifying bulk before they were ever mounted. What stands in the glass case today is literally a worn-down shadow of the beasts that once stopped an empire. So, what turned these two lions into history's most infamous man-eaters? And what was the true toll of the terror? Patterson stated the number of victims was an astonishing 135. But modern scientific research questions this figure. Isotope analyses on the remains at the Chicago Field Museum and Patterson's own initial company logs suggest the number was likely between 28 and 35. The isotope analysis revealed one lion had consumed the equivalent of about 10.5 humans and the other 24.2. However, one must not forget the countless unfortunate native Africans Patterson mentioned in his memoirs, for whom no records were kept. This lack of colonial-era records means the true death toll will likely remain a mystery. As for the reasons, the scientific community favors a perfect storm theory, where a series of factors converged, rather than a single killer factor. The first prominent theory is the disability hypothesis. Examination of one of the lion skulls in the museum revealed severe dental disease and a root tip abscess. Such an injury would have made it excruciatingly painful for the lion to catch and kill its normal prey, like buffalo or zebra. Microscopic wear patterns on their teeth also show they fed on soft flesh, much like captive lions in a zoo. Humans, slower, smaller, and with softer bones, became an easier solution for a predator in pain. But this was not the only factor. The rinderpest pandemic of the 1890s had ravaged Africa, wiping out the lion's main prey source. This prey depletion likely forced the lions to seek alternative foods. The fact that Tsavo was an old slave trade route supports the theory that lions may have acquired a habit for human flesh by feeding on the bodies of slaves who died on the journey. Finally, the opportunity factor comes into play. The railroad construction brought thousands of inexperienced and poorly protected workers right into the lion's habitat. The dense, thorny Nika vegetation provided ideal camouflage for an ambush predator. Recent DNA analyses of hairs stuck in the lion's teeth revealed not only human DNA, but also DNA from giraffe, oryx, waterbuck, zebra, and even impala. This shows that humans were not their only food source, but were included in their diet when they were an available and easy option. Injury, prey scarcity, habit, and unprecedented opportunity, a deadly cocktail had formed in Tsavo. This was not madness or innate monstrosity, but a terrifyingly logical, learned survival strategy. The horrifying story of the Tsavo Man-Eaters is more than just a dark chapter in history. It holds important lessons for our time. Today, the Tsavo Conservation Area, as Kenya's largest national park, is home to a rich diversity of wildlife, including lions. The modern lions of Tsavo still carry some of the unique traits of their ancestors, like manelessness and a social structure often centered on a single male. They are living proof of the power of evolution and adaptation under harsh conditions. However, the fundamental conflict underlying the 1898 tragedy, the tension between human activity and the wilderness, persists today. Habitat loss, the expansion of human settlements, the decline of natural prey due to poaching, and retaliatory killings to protect livestock seriously threaten the future of African lions. It is estimated that the lion population in Africa has declined by over 40% in the last 2 decades. Conservation organizations like the Tsavo Trust work tirelessly, shoulder to shoulder with the Kenya Wildlife Service, to protect this iconic species. They fight poaching, monitor lion populations using scientific methods, and, most importantly, work to reduce human-wildlife conflict by building fences and running education and aid programs with local communities. The bitter lesson of 1898 is clear. When predators' habitats are encroached upon and their natural food sources are destabilized, conflict is inevitable. The way to protect lions is to protect their prey, secure their habitats, and create a sustainable model of coexistence with the people living on their borders. The tragedy of 1898 was a failure. Modern conservation is the hope of succeeding. The ghost and the darkness are gone. The bridge they tried to stop still stands, rusting under the African sun. But the fear they created never truly left these lands. It lives on in the silence of the Tsavo night, in the sudden snap of a twig, in the eyes that watch from the tall grass. All events and details recounted in this documentary are taken from Lieutenant-Colonel John Henry Patterson's book, The Man-Eaters of Tsavo. Subscribe for untold stories from the wild.